Hello and welcome to the Lifeline podcast. My name is Ari. I am here with today's guest and my partner of 3 years, Ez Whitecloud. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, all right. Today's discussion topic is schizo spectrum disorders, psychosis, and spirituality.
Can't forget the paranormal.
And the paranormal. Yes, we can talk about that as well.
Yeah.
So, we both just kind of wanted to share our experiences having schizo spectrum disorders, kind of compare and contrast, and just open up about our experiences. So, as how did you first discover that you were on the schizo spectrum?
That's a toughie. Um, we don't know specifically what kind of schizo disorder, but definitely, as you said, on the spectrum. For me, my uh, psychosis episodes at first were not strictly psychosis. Um, Shit, this is a tough question to answer.
Yeah, you can take some time to think about it.
Okay. Um, the idea was proposed to me by my psychiatrist as we worked together the different layers of my reality. I had lived in a haunted apartment, not being the only one who experienced these happenings. I also have some of it recorded on voice memos, but later on in discussion, my psychiatrist believes that I'm on the schizo spectrum of some kind. Um, After we've tried, shit, that doesn't make sense. Let's see here.
It's okay.
This is a tough question with how complex the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex situation to find yourself in.
Yeah, that is true. Well, the label was given to me by Winnebago Mental Health Institute. But prior to then, my psychiatrist of um, 5 years or more did not provide a diagnosis of schizo anything. She believes in paranormal and spiritual. And so, with this mental health piece to it, she is now considering perhaps schizophrenia or schizoaffective or something else. We're not too sure. Um, I'm currently waiting for answers from a neuropsych examination testing thing that I did. And I still haven't gotten those results, but we have part of my care plan on hold while we get those deeper insights.
Okay.
But um so I guess that's how I discovered it was by Winnebago Mental Health Institute, and my psychiatrist and I are investigating what that means for me, what led up to my horrendous episodes, and trying to think about how to prevent similar things from happening.
Hmm. So tell me more about your haunted apartment. Like, what sort of things were you experiencing?
Well, I've lived in two oh shit. Okay. Well, I was in a house and I wasn't the only one who experienced an entity roaming around the house. Curtains would open and close. Um, on the counters in the kitchen, plates and bowls would move across the counter. Um, things would get like when my former housemate and I, when we were in the kitchen together, um, there was, and it was just me and him home, and we had set our food down, and it got put into the trash. But I would say the freakiest part, though, was the window curtains moving as if someone was peeking through them and then closing it.
Oh,
So
creepy.
that was one house I was in. There was some paranormal things going on in the house I grew up at, and my brother can second me on that. But in this apartment, I had a best friend at the time, and I was used to the noises I was hearing. I was used to my feathers in the doorway moving that I had hung from the uh, the door frame. There was no door. It was just a frame that opened. Wait, no, there was a door. It was just propped open. Oops. But I had feathers with dental floss and other strings um, hanging feathers from this walkway. And so the feathers would kind of vibrate, go up and down, go in spirals. And I didn't think anything of it. And I had my best friend at the time. She was apartment sitting because I had goldfish at the time. And she noticed the feathers and examined to try to debunk the activity. But there was no signs of anything logical, like windows or drafts or anything, that would affect or move those feathers in that way.
Okay.
Um, so that was a first sign that I was living in a haunted apartment, and things escalated from there once the entities or spirits, whatever they were, once they were acknowledged, then more started happening.
Oh, goodness. How do you make sure you stay grounded when all that's going on?
Well, um, I something that I did to help me stay grounded was to get paranormal investigation gear. That way I can show myself that it's not a hallucination.
Hmm.
And so, with the hallucinations, I do experience those, and I stay grounded by, well, taking my meds
Yeah, that's
and
always good.
and staying present in my friendships and relationships. Um, trying to take each day as they come. I do yoga. I meditate. I listen to different hertz frequencies,
Nice.
and working with elements helps, like incense or sticking my feet in dirt or um, kind of playing with my plants that I have, just get my hands in dirt.
Hmm.
And something I discovered that's grounding for me that brings me into the present is petting my plants.
Yeah, for me, petting an animal can be very grounding.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So,
I don't have that luxury, but my plans suffice and I love them very much.
what sort of paranormal gear did you end up getting, and what were the results of your experiments with them?
Well, I got an EVP. What else are they called? EVP.
Can you explain what that is?
I'm gonna have to Google it.
All right, I can look it up too.
Um, well, there's a few things. I got it from Ghost Stop. Um,
EVP stands for electronic voice phenomenon.
yes, I had an EVP wrist recorder. I also had an EMF meter. And there was something else that I had, but I don't remember what it was. But I had also got good data with my former iPad as well before I broke it. Um, I was able to record whispers in my apartment. I got the idea to use just a plain old recorder from this video I came across online from a priest who was experiencing being surrounded by paranormal things.
Oh
So
wow.
he just used a plain old recording tool and was able to capture the screams. So I found that intriguing. So I decided to um, record just using voice memos on my iPad. And so during the move out of that apartment, and also after that apartment, I moved into an even more haunted apartment, sadly. But the way this one ended was once I was completely moved out, I went back into the apartment. I brought incense and my recording equipment, not just my iPad, but the other stuff that my payee actually sent me money and wrote it down as mental health for kind of debunking some of the things I was experiencing if debunking was needed.
Mhm.
However, I did catch activity on all of my tools.
Oh wow.
And yep. And so I had done a live recording on Facebook on my iPad as I burned incense and called upon the entities in my room and in the building. And um, I was able to capture what I took my tools. The one I'm thinking about. I took my EMF meter with me, and before I called upon the entities, I walked around my apartment with my iPad recording Facebook Live with my EMF, kind of scanning the different areas in my apartment, and my EMF did not go off. And then I had done the opening sort of ritual thing to invite them into my space. Sorry, I'm drinking coffee at the same time.
It's okay.
Coffee's good. But I called upon the spirits in the area, asked them to show themselves to me in the ways they wanted to. And so then I started hearing some different knocks and um, knocks and voices. And I went around the apartment. After I did that, I went around the apartment with my EMF and it was going off. So it wasn't going off before, and then it was going off after I called upon them and invited them into the space. And so then I took my iPad and my EMF meter to my hallway storage in that building. And I was all moved out of there too. And so I propped up my iPad, and my equipment was going off like crazy. And so, as entities will do, my iPad shut off.
Oh goodness. What does an EMF meter do exactly?
I don't know how to explain it. Hold on.
Okay.
Um, let's see here.
I'm looking it up.
EMF.
These devices measure the strength and frequency of electromagnetic fields.
Yeah, they are popular and works well for paranormal investigations. They are very common. Um, I guess now that I'm looking up some other things about EMFs, it says there's no scientific evidence that EMF meters can detect ghosts. Well, it also says that ghosts are not scientifically proven. So, to exist. So, I mean, one could argue that it's just a fluke, I guess. But something that was important to me, though, was that my stuff didn't go off in the apartment at all until I did an opening ceremony of some kind to invite them back into the space. Because as I was moving, I had set some things up to where, for protection, to where entities couldn't move my stuff on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did everything I could to kick them out so I could pack up and move out. And then, so I think that worked fairly well. But then, like I said, after that opening, I don't know if I want to call it a prayer or a meditation or ceremony or ritual or what, but after I did that, my apartment went off. So I believe that it's not just a fluke of the machine.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, to be fair, too, though, I had friends in my life at that time who also experienced the paranormal in that apartment. So, regardless if it was my equipment not working or not, it's even so, I wasn't the only one who experienced it. And so, to go back to your previous question, that is a way that I ground, and processing and remembering that I wasn't the only one who experienced it
Mm-hmm.
definitely gives me a sense of grounding that I just was hallucinating like crazy.
Yeah. Are you able to recognize when you're entering a psychosis episode, or are you so out of it that it's hard for you to recognize the signs? For me personally, it's very like it's very difficult for me to recognize it in myself, at least in the times that I've experienced psychosis in the past.
Yeah, I think as it becomes, I feel like for some point it's new to everybody. But when when it was new to me, I didn't know it was psychosis until one of my other episodes, to where it was starting out the same, where I had sort of set up um kind of these things that I call trip wires. And so for me, sorting through paranormal, spiritual, and hallucinations, I thought that setting up these kind of traps and connecting things together with string, I called them tripwires. And I guess I kind of drew things together. It sounds weird, but like you know how in investigation scenes there's strings and pictures and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what I did. And so that happened to me two or three times where I set up a system like that. And I have discovered that that kind of behavior is an indication that I am not connected to reality.
Mm-hmm. For me, I'm very dependent on other people telling me when I'm disconnected from reality. Um, I haven't had an episode in a while, but when I did, like, I usually wouldn't catch it myself. It would be my loved ones who are like, "Hey, what you're experiencing something weird. You seem off." Stuff like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I have a similar experience with my housemate who, well, he's my best friend. And so I there are nights where I hear stuff in the hallway or I hear music or I hear knocking of some kind. And so he is sensitive to paranormal and he's rather spiritual himself as well. But a grounding thing that I do, similar to what you do, is that for bringing you back to reality, is that I reach out to him and ask him, "Oh, did you hear this? This is what I heard. Did you see that? This is what I saw."
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, having him there being touchy about and sensitive about that kind of stuff does help me too. But also, on the flip side, he does have a schizophrenia diagnosis.
That's got to be really tough to have the both of you have to reality check and not being able to trust your own perceptions.
Well, his is in the realm of paranoia, and
Okay.
it got better over time. And without going into too much detail, it's like how my psychiatrist didn't give me a diagnosis because we were working through these very real problems. She believes in spiritual practices and manifestation and paranormal. So we played it by ear for my treatment. And then with my best friend, he had a similar situation where he went through XYZ and told people in his life were telling professionals that he was schizophrenic, but they weren't taking into account his very real experiences that happened prior to that diagnosis. And there was a slip up episode that he talked about where he wasn't grounded in reality, but aside from that, he really hasn't had much for episodes. And so he's still trying to figure things out as well, but he does have the diagnosis of schizophrenia, paranoia.
Okay. That sort of ties into my next question, which is, are your healthcare providers supportive of your spiritual beliefs when you're looking for treatments for your schizo spectrum disorder?
Like I said previously, my psychiatrist was rather open to the idea of things beyond mental illnesses specifically.
That's good.
Yes. But as episodes continue to roll on and gradually get worse, she was questioning things, but still did not provide a diagnosis as well, but had her very real skepticism about it all. And so her and I agreed that um, if I am approaching an episode, I need to kind of go off this checklist and see, well, is anybody else seeing and hearing these things? Um, and be mindful of thoughts I'm thinking and try to be aware, if at all possible, if I'm having flashbacks. Um, my psychiatrist did say that I have CBTSD hallucinations, but not specifically schizophrenia per se.
Mm.
But she, yes, she had told me that it seems like my audio hallucinations are not all of them, but a section of them is related and comes from my CPTSD.
Okay.
And then I also am in CCS right now, and I have a really cool team. And for those who don't know what CCS is, it's some sort of comprehensive care something, and it's through the county, and you get a prescription to be in that program, and they interview you a few times, ask some questions to see if you qualify. And so I qualified, and I had to answer a bunch of questions to see which providers and which I don't know what to call it, but to see what would be a good match for me. And so through that program, I was paired with a peer supporter, and she is a professional psychic. And so I have been able to process my experiences and sort of filter through and categorize different experiences on what could have been mental illness related, what could have been spiritually happening, as well as paranormal. So she's been helping me sort through that stuff. So, in regard to my experience and everything clustering together to build up to things that have happened, I have a safe place to discuss that and be able to get my experiences validated and understood. And it makes me feel less insane, even though we're all a little mad.
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad you have that support.
Me too, I got lucky. So, um, working through my spirituality with her, and she lives in a haunted place right now as well, and so talking about the paranormal with her is also a huge relief.
What sort of things has she experienced?
Um, she had um she was looking for her charger, and so she believes that the entities she's living with aren't harmful, but they're tricksters.
Mm.
And so she has found her belongings in trees in her yard.
Oh, goodness.
And there, I don't remember what else she shared with me. That's the one I remember the most because I thought, huh, your iPhone charger was in a tree?
Mm.
That's odd. That's wild. How did you get it? You know?
Yeah.
So her and I relate in many ways, and she also has BPD, and so with me getting that diagnosis from Winnebago Mental Health Institute, we discussed that as well.
Yeah, and you're welcome to discuss that here if you want or not. It's totally up to you. I'm open to anything.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I I'm so confused when it comes to that diagnosis. Um I have reactive attachment disorder from when I was an infant in a Russian orphanage. And where was I going with that? And Winnebago Mental Health Institute said I had borderline personality disorder, and that was just the updated adult version of reactive attachment disorder. And I've discussed that with my psychiatrist, and she openly said, we don't have to say that you have that, and
Mm.
what Winnebago does is they just base whatever off of how you come in. And so even though they know nothing about you, and they don't know anything about your past, they don't know anything about your experiences, they just write you off as whatever as you are there, and then develop whatever during your time there, and that's only a chunk of somebody's life. It's hard to really get answers during a chunk of your life.
Yeah, you have to be willing to look at the big picture.
Yes, and Winnebago does not do that.
Mm.
So when I talked to my psychiatrist about this, she had said that we can dismiss the diagnosis from Winnebago, um, but keep in the back of the mind as, I don't know, something possible down the road. But um, she believes that it's totally appropriate to say that I have reactive attachment disorder and not borderline personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I got off topic.
It's okay. I don't mind hearing about it.
Okay.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
You had oh, where'd it go? I'm looking at these questions here.
The only one that I didn't ask, because I feel like you kind of addressed it already, was how does having a schizospectrum disorder tie into your experience of spirituality? So if you want, you could elaborate more on that.
Oh, let's see here. Well, the first time I started hearing voices, I was in my apartment meditating, doing third eye visualization meditation techniques to further develop third eye abilities, third eye practices, third eye experiences. And I worked through different chakras at different times with different crystals, and I have crystal quartz singing bowls, and I do tarot, and so and oracle cards. I do a mixture of things. And so what I was doing in my apartment was practicing these um kind of strengthening my abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned about this thing where you can get yourself into a vibration where you can send um messages through time and space to somebody's subconscious.
Oh,
And
trippy.
yeah, and so nothing like, oh, you're gonna marry me, I want you to do this when you go to a park. You're going to go to this park and do this one thing. It's nothing like that. It's it's more so having intentions of well, one example would be that witches do is return the negative energy to its source. So that is one example of meditating and sending messages to somebody's subconscious. So that's more so what I was doing. And so after I had I tried to send messages to somebody, and I had never heard voices before, and in sort of the astral realm, I saw um the transmission, and once it was received, I started hearing voices, and I haven't been able to stop them since.
What were the voices saying?
Oh, um, some of them, it was a lot of things mumble jumbled together, and some of them were voices saying I hate you. Some of them were voices of calling me a psychopath.
Oh,
Yeah, some voices of um uh kind of hard to pinpoint because there were other voices coming from other ways.
mm,
And processing this with my peer supporter, we have been sorting through the different realms for my trauma healing. Um, so, for example, another layer of hearing voices, I believe that that practice opened me up to other realms of hearing things from different dimensions, different entities, um, getting transmissions from past lives. And so all of this sort of happened at once. And that was very overwhelming.
yeah. And you had told me, you said that meds don't really help with this.
Um,
Or do they?
not really. We have tried olanzapine. We have tried all sorts of things. Winnebago put me on heavy doses of Haldol and quetiapine, and the doses used for hallucination and schizophrenia and um, all that jazz. She was telling me about the different dosages that are typically used for different disorders. And so the quetiapine dosage that I'm at is meant for insomnia and anxiety.
Okay.
So I am not being treated for schizophrenia spectrum stuff with the quetiapine, and it is an antipsychotic. And then I'm also on Haldol, and I'm not really too sure I know what it's doing. I just been taking it for a few years now, but I have learned that medication doesn't really help a whole lot. And if I stay up later and I don't get much sleep, then things kind of get worse in my auditory. And so being able to take a med that knocks me out does clear up my conscious.
Okay.
And yeah, and I am actually able to discern to some degree what's a hallucination and what's an entity. And so um my my psychiatrist believes that the voices I hear stem from anxiety and CBTSD, as well as other things that we have. recently addressed and talked about. Um, so on a daily basis, around fans and wind and running water and air conditioners and heaters and machines of sorts, I hear voices. And so I think those are just going to be permanently there for to some degree,
Mm.
and medication doesn't really take that away. Even when Winnebago put me on high dosages of Haldol and quetiapine 3 times a day, they kept asking me, "Do you still hear voices?" And so I'd say yes, and then they'd increase my dosage. So eventually I told them I can't hear voices, and they stopped increasing my dosage.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
It was, yeah. And so, with my peer supporter and my psychiatrist, we have been able to kind of stretch out what different, like what you were saying of when you're about to have psychosis, or however we worded it. Um, there are voices that indicate that to me, but also lately I have been redeveloping and um, expanding upon my experiences with the deities that I work with. So a few nights ago, I started hearing some whispering, and in through the fan, I could hear, "We want to speak with you," and I don't know where that came from, but
Jeez.
um, I also hadn't been sleeping the much sleeping much with my insomnia. So when I take my meds, they help me sleep. And so I figured that was my sign to take my meds and go to bed.
Mm.
And that helped. But I have a pendulum that I felt connected to work with the main deity that I work with. And so during that night, I put all of my faith into my pendulum and um, asked it if I was hallucinating. And the pendulum had said yes. And so that helped me quite a bit. And I had an idea that I was hallucinating because my left ear is really messed up. Um, it's always plugged, it's always ringing. Um, when I have my voice at a certain level of loudness, the pressure vibrates it. My eardrum sort of pops like there's water in it. And that happens to me when I'm in cars. That happens to me when I'm talking. That happens to me when I'm listening to music. That happens to me when I'm at work. That's the way my eardrums work. And I have a long history of ear infections and perforated eardrums. And so when I hear voices through my left ear, I know that it's a hallucination because that eardrum doesn't work very well.
Okay. So, which deities do you work with?
I work with ancient Egyptian deities. And so the one I primarily work with, um, I've I've learned 2 ways to pronounce his name, and the first one is Khanum or Khanum, and then the other one is Kunum. And so I go back and forth between them, and I don't know if there's somebody I could ask for the actual way to speak it. I don't want to be offensive
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, be rude at all to the deities. So I do my best that even though if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, at least my practices are still there. But I have worked with many deities from ancient Egypt, Baset, um, Anubis, Thoth, um, Isis, Mot, and that's all I can think of right now. And so I went to them for different things. And I worked a little bit with Osiris, and there was this one time where in my second haunted apartment, I had torn out these pages of different gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, and I put them on my fridge. And so, with different voices I was hearing and different visions I was getting, and different other signs and symbols coming into my life, there were deities that I got upset with, and it made me mad, and they made me mad. And so on this on this paper from this magazine on my fridge, I used a piece of chalk and I would circle the ones that I was working with and then X out the ones that I was mad at.
Mm.
And so I had a friend who was visiting, and she gave me my second face tattoo. And I she asked about what was going on in my fridge, and I told her about the ones I was upset with and why, and the ones I was currently working with. And so while she was over, we were talking about how my life has been and how her life has been. And just by the stories I was telling and the ways I was struggling, she pointed out to me that the things I'm going through are parts of existence that go with what those deities do, if that makes any sense.
Sort of.
Where my experiences of specific chaos and things going wrong, these were things that those deities worked with. And so me being mad at them brought that wrath upon me,
Oh,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
So I do my best now. I have reignited the flame of my spiritual and kind of religious practices to some degree, working with ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses. And I'm taking a different route with that than I did before. And when I first started working with these deities, I picked up I I I took my car to go to a thrift store to see if I could come across, I don't know, for some reason I thought Goodwill would sell tarot cards. Why? I don't know.
Mm.
But I went there. But I went there and I found a Nat Geo thick book of I forget what it was called, but it was some sort of entire or a complete visual something about mythology in all these different cultures. And so what I decided to do was pinpoint the different gods and goddesses and deities and such on the pages throughout that whole book to make an oracle deck of these different beings, right?
Mm.
And so I came across ancient Egypt, I came across Kunum, and I instantly felt grounded. Things started calming down around me. Um, I felt deeply connected to Earth once I came across him. Just by looking at him, just by holding the book, I could feel his presence. And that was really powerful for me. So I built an altar as a deck of cards of mine recommended many times in a row, and I had never made an altar before, and this was the Sacred Self Care Oracle. And so the card that said make an altar was popping up all the time. And So I decided to make an altar for this deity I came across in this book. And I would leave offerings. I found all the gold and gold plated stuff that I had, and I put it on the shelf with his painting that I made of him above it, kind of like to the setup that I have currently. And as I was hearing all these voices, this was the first haunted apartment where uh, my friend was fish sitting. Um, there were all these different voices happening, and I did everything I could to sort through them. And like I said, everything hit at once. And something I have been talking about with my peer supporter is that I was consulting with my cards throughout all of that, and I had around 20 to 30 decks at hand.
Mm.
And I went to specific decks to ask questions. And so the cards I kept getting out of all these different decks, and I pulled cards from multiple decks just to see if my cards were bullshitting me at all. And the answers I kept getting was development of psychic abilities, ascension, um, multidimensional related things. And so these themes carried throughout my decks, and it freaked me out. And so also during that time, I was practicing fifth dimensional work in the realm of thoughts turning into things and visualizing things coming into your life, and then you get them. And scholars, or I don't even know if scholars is the right term, but people who are professional in these fields will tell you that seeing something coming into your life and believing that you already have it attracts that reality into your own. So I was doing a lot of that, and my manifestations were happening almost instantly, and that freaks me out.
Yeah, it
And
does.
I wanted a mortar and pestle, and that showed up a couple days later. I wanted a projector, that showed up a couple days later. I visualized, and I didn't really have any money. And so for these things to come up to me to be gifted or things I found, it was just I didn't even go looking. They were just there. And there was this futon that I had visualized, never seeing one like it before. The size I wanted, the color I wanted, the texture I wanted, and the frame I wanted. And I said, I can't buy this, but I can visualize having it from what I've learned. So I went on a drive, and then out on the curb was this exact futon, and it was free, and it was really only used once or twice.
Oh
And
wow.
so it was pretty much brand new. And I took it home with me. And then there was another time where I wanted this specific lamp, and I found that on the side of the road as well. And these things were in great condition. And
Nice.
so I, when I was making this oracle deck with these deities, gods, and goddesses and such, I made the backs the same. And no, that's not what I did. Okay. For this deck, on one side, it wasn't really a logical deck because there weren't backs and then different fronts. It's kind of difficult to explain. I had written down what who the deity was on one side, and then on the other side, I painted whatever came through to me, whether it was a transmission or if it was a vibration or if it was I don't know. And so what happened with me was that I was painting these cards, having conversations with voices. And so, based off of the conversations we had, the colors I was having, and the images that were being made, they ended up matching what that deity was on the other side. So I would paint that one side and then guess who I was talking to, flip over the card and have it be that being.
Nice.
And so that's an example of also existing in the fifth dimension, and also in the fifth dimension the body, that's the realm of ascended masters. And if you are vibrating in that dimension, that's not good, because the body starts to wither. It cannot contain that vibration needed in the fifth dimension. And the fifth dimension is where ascended masters exist. And so I was communing with ascended masters in my apartment, having conversations, and I was really only living off of nuts and what, dried fruit and water. And eventually everything came crashing down because, mind you, I was in a haunted apartment. Mind you, I had CBTSD, audio hallucinations happening with my former traumas of being yelled at about things and such.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, then I had the paranormal. I had all these things going on. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to sort through this with my cards, mind you. And all of a sudden, I hear the sounds of hammers and zippers, and oh, it was wild. And there was kind of an echo to it. And so I had no idea what that was. I talked to my cards again, and there was a voice that was above all over voices that I heard clear and constructively, and it brought down the noises of the other only because this one was louder and more predominant, or dominant, or whatever word it is. But
Mm-hmm.
um so he had identified himself as Kunum and helped me make a list to do different practices and different grounding techniques to bring me back to the third dimension from the fifth dimension. And so I had asked him what all that ruckus was, and he had told me that he was repairing rips in time and space. And I had no idea what that meant. And I wanted to know more about what was happening. And so this voice had said that whatever I put into him, he returns tenfold. And I talked about that with my peer supporter, and she said that makes sense when you have offerings to a deity. And that's what they do, is they return that energy back to you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had I was trying to figure out what rips in times and space. And so this voice, speaking over all these other voices, had told me that I ascended incorrectly and too fast, and that's part of why everything was blowing up. And so we worked together to bring me back to the third dimension and start from the ground root and redo things. And that helped me calm and quiet my mind, and that is also things that I talked about with my peer supporter. And she had said, with all the chaos going on now, it would be best for me to reestablish that relationship and continue. However, do it differently, in a way that doesn't jump beyond the fourth dimension. And I have a partner who works at a metaphysical shop, Aster, and he does a lot of spiritual work. He does numerology. He went to school for energy work and physical therapy, or not physical therapy, like massages and pressure points and acupressure and all this stuff. and he knows quite a bit about different crystals. And the more he has worked there, the more his spirituality has developed. And I don't remember where I was going with that. Do you remember
I
what
don't
did I
know where you
talk
were
about?
going with that, but that was deeply fascinating. So thank you for sharing. I
Oh,
just
I remember. I remember. Okay,
yeah.
okay. Throughout this whole ascension, whatever process, talking to my cards, communing among ascended masters, I would have regular calls with Aster, and he was helping me process this stuff as well. And he definitely said multiple times that I am one of the most high vibrating beings he has ever met, and that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. So, he, as well as Kunum, were saying that I missed the fourth dimensional rules and lessons, and I just jumped straight from three to five, which is how it was incorrect and too fast. And so, speaking with Esther yet again, and with my peer supporter, they both agreed that for me, I should make sure to do work that exists within and throughout the fourth dimension prior to getting back into my manifestation techniques.
It sounds
And
like you have a
so
really good support system.
I do. You're correct. And that is the spiritual part of it. And then being in a paranormal, speaking of being in a paranormal apartment, I had bought a hex candle, a hex breaking candle. And so, kid you not, once these layers of paranormal and CBTSD popped up, and also, um, I forgot what that word was, but anyways, I got this hex breaking candle, and I set it on my altar, and I lit it. I laid in bed, and I saw all these shadows spiraling into the candle,
Oh,
and I was hearing different screams and different moans and different words, and they all sort of got sucked up by this candle, and my conscience was clear.
wow. That's quite the experience. I have one final question for you, and we can wrap things up.
Sorry, I
That
sort of
is,
rambled there.
that's okay. I don't mind hearing about it.
Okay.
What advice would you give to someone who might be struggling with a schizospectrum disorder or just mental health in general right now? Do you have any words of wisdom?
Um, with things that are going on these days all over the place, I would say to find your peace in the present moment, however that means for you. But in more so towards uh healthier healthier things.
Mm,
Um I consider um moderate use of different substances healthy. I just That's what I believe. And so if that helps be present in it and just make sure it's not something that alters you so much that you cannot connect with nature.
mm,
So I believe that being connected to to nature, to the universe, and having faith in different beliefs of some kind. Say you're atheist, but you connect very well with dogs. Well, then spend your time with dogs. I consider that spiritual to some degree. And someone else might not think it that way, but you're communing with nature. I feel like that's a magical thing to be doing. And so, uh, doing things that connect you to Earth, taking one moment at a time, reaching out to supports, and the Trevor text line has helped me many, many times. So I recommend them as well. Definitely the best crisis uh, organization I have come across is the Trevor Project.
Okay,
And
I'll add a link to
uh,
them.
what?
I'll add a link to them.
Oh, good idea. Yeah, they have a call line and a text line. Um, so I recommend them. And then another thing I would say for things going on these days all over the place is to not necessarily keep your circle small, but to be honest with your own sensitivity and your comforts and boundaries and things. So if somebody has this large issue that's important to you, for example, I will say this about my former boss. She, oh boy, she had told me that I, what? The Trump administration talking about how they wouldn't take away trans rights. And so that was bullshit. And for some reason, I'm friends with her on Facebook, and she had made a post about kicking out illegal immigrants. And for my own mental health stability, I will need to unfriend her and potentially block her because it doesn't align with what I believe, and only reading about it without being able to express my feelings and beliefs and have them reciprocated and listened to and considered, I'm just gonna not deal with her. And so that's sort of like keeping my circle small.
Mm.
But I guess my point is that if something doesn't feel right and you trust yourself and your intuition, then you should probably go with that.
All right,
And
that's good advice. Thank you.
yeah, that's the best way I can put it. I don't know. I believe in intuitive practices and knowledge and psychic downloads and all that stuff. And I definitely believe that intuition and gut feelings are intertwined.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you'd like to share or anything you want to promote before we wrap things up?
Hmm. Um.
It's okay
I
if not.
think I think it's important to collect rocks, pine cones, and feathers, and sticks that look cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me for a chat.
Yeah. Anytime. Hello and welcome to the Lifeline.